Florida's Space Coast, this is your career.
Welcome to Your Career. I'm Debbie Featherston, your host, and with me tonight are two guests who know a lot about job search and providing services to individuals who are in transition. With me tonight, I have Deborah Ballard and Lisa Hancock, both from Manpower. Ladies, thank you for being with me. And actually, this is a continuation of our initial conversation. The last time when we concluded, we had been talking about exploring what employers really want from people. That's where we ended our conversation, right? Mm-hmm. So I'd like to pick up this conversation with the interview process. And Lisa, would you mind just kicking it off with your initial thoughts about what's a situational interview?
Sure. So it's all the rage, I'll say. Started maybe 10 or 15 years ago. No longer do employers ask, can you do this? Will you do this? Yes, no questions. Right. It's all behavioral type of interview questions. Give me a time. Tell me a situation when this happened. They all ask those questions that start with, explain a time when you had to exhibit team building skills or problem solving skills, right?
And the trick is to balance it with the right information and also include not too many details, but always trying to show yourself in the best possible light.
Yeah. Well, what can candidates do to take, what steps can candidates take to really ensure that they are confidently answering those questions?
Yeah. So I always tell any candidate to make sure that they're well prepared. They know the standard questions that are coming. The first one is the biggest pitfall, tell me about yourself, right? That's the one where they get stuck in the mire from the very beginning. They shouldn't take the long way around the barn. I was born in New York, it's about giving the fastest answer, right? Don't tell them that I was born here and this is where I've been the last 18 years.
Yeah, I've got 6 cats or 20 kids.
Well, they don't want any of that personal information at all.
Not at all.
It's about knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, knowing what your accomplishments are, and being able to give the best answer succinctly, and being able to separate yourself from the other candidates that they might have met with before or after.
One of the best examples, and I think a lot of us deal with this because it's in every aspect of employment that I can think of, is customer service, and then you're interfacing with people. So they want to know exactly how you successfully do that or how you deal with a difficult situation. And that's the tricky part, because it oftentimes pops into our head the most difficult situation we've ever had ever. And those don't typically come out right. Yeah. So that's the other reason preparation is so key, is because you don't want to end up coming out of it telling your whole life story of this difficult situation and how it affected you. You want to just succinctly explain how you resolve the issue. And think of it in terms of what the employer would want you to do, because it's not really, I'm in this situation, how would I handle it? It's what the employer would want. And so if you're able to effectively kind of indicate that in 1 to 2 minutes, then you're really doing your job well in the interview.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. 1 to 2 minutes. Yeah, because I often tell people to narrow it down even further. Be prepared to really respond to that. I think more to one of the points that you made, Lisa, was, be concise, right? Yep. Good job. Thank you for that. Are there any other particular points that are going to be really helpful to them in preparing for an interview?
I tell them there are a few things that are critical to be truthful all the time in their resume and in their answers, because falsehoods always come out, right?
Right.
Short answers, and to be authentic in their personalities, to be confident in their own personal brand, but to be authentic. And to Deborah's point, how they answer those behavioral interview questions, we give them an acronym. We call it CAR, C-A-R, it's easy to remember. It's the challenge they were presented with, the action they took, and the result that it gave them. So it's a really easy way to remember how to phrase the answer to that question as quick as they can, and to give it the, kind of the oomph of the result.
So challenge, action, result.
And result. And that's how to answer that question as
Okay.
quickly and result-oriented as they can.
And be confident that you've really given them the information.
Absolutely.
But it also, I think, is kind of a clever trick, because I think it would create that visual image that you were talking about, Deborah.
Right. I think if it refines the vision when you absolutely get it down to the precise steps. And then also practicing is critical. I tend to be a little bit verbose, so I can kind of relate to this, and I really practice when I know I'm going to give a presentation or be in an interview. I have to be consistently concise and not go off on tangents. And if anyone's more talkative like I am, they know that they have to practice their answers. Oftentimes, they're surprised at how long they've spoken.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, maybe I should take this out, and really work through it. So at least give yourself a chance to kind of work through some of those issues.
Right. We kicked it off by talking about situational interviews because they are the most popular. No doubt about it. They are the most popular. But there's different types of interviews. What are they? Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, they have like a panel interview, which it could be a group of people interviewing one individual. Then they sometimes have the reverse when they're staffing for a large number of people. They may bring in a large group and have a few people asking the same question down the line right in front of everyone else. So
let's go back and unpack those just a little bit. I
Yes.
want to make certain people get this. The panel interview is where you have multiple representatives from the company and one candidate.
Right.
So those multiple representatives are sitting like the three of us, and then we have some person that we're interviewing.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the other one is where
It's a group.
you have a group interview. So you have a group of candidates, and you could have one or more representatives from the company as well?
It could be, and the key element is really to get them in a room together and also study how they interface and their level of confidence, especially in different realms. Confidence sometimes is key.
Certainly.
Those skill sets are important. You can pass certain exams and show that you have the computer skills and knowledge or the tactile skills and knowledge, but if the confidence is a critical element, then that's a way that they can get them to display it.
And then there's two other very common ones. So most of ours that we find start with a telephone interview. So companies don't want to take the time to carve out time on their schedules unless they do that infamous telephone interview. And candidates need to be very confident in that they set aside time that is truly for that telephone interview. Don't take it in the car. Don't take it while they're driving. Don't take it while the kids are screaming in the background. That telephone interview is the gateway to determining whether that employer, that HR director wants to carve out time to do that in-person interview. And then the most up and coming is either the virtual phone or the virtual video interview where employers are sending out pre-patterned questions to candidates that they can tape the answers to, either audio or visual, and they send them back. So the employers don't even have to have time on their calendar to do the interviews. They can just listen or watch the interviews in their time and then determine whether they want to do the second or the third interview. So it's ingenious, but it takes some of the human element out of that first phase.
It does, doesn't it? Because the other thing that I've seen is after a phone interview, I've seen that the company will send a list of 10 questions, 8 questions, no specific number, but usually it's 8 to 10 questions that I've seen, and they'll expect the candidates to have a written response. Now, I've not seen the recorded yet, but it's a written response, right?
Yeah.
Right, and sometimes they're just looking as to whether they can craft an intelligent sentence, and really studying the punctuation, grammar, because a lot of times businesses now have to respond to things in email. It's a documented way of doing so, and so you want somebody representing the company not having a lot of mistakes in their correspondence or any mistakes in the correspondence, and so that's critical. But the video one of the things I kind of like about it is it really does compare apples to apples. It sets is this person dressed appropriately? Check. And you're asking the same questions in the same tenor, and it's consistent across the board. And for an initial screening, once we really reflect on the fact that employers in this process are trying to find ways to eliminate people to get down to the few that they want to interview in person for the actual position. So this is a good way to weed people out if they're not speaking clearly and communicating effectively, if they sound disinterested. And so it's really about having that presence, and it shows that level of engagement if you're able to successfully navigate that.
Yeah, and another great point that just popped in my head when I was hearing you describe what they could look for. And first of all, to summarize, what you're saying is that the companies will have a standard list of criterion that now they can just go through check, 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 and it's a real apples to apples comparison.
Yes.
So if they truly want to get the best candidates, this is a process that they're going to follow, number one, right?
Yes.
Right.
Level supply and ground.
I mean, eventually through the interview process, you do get to that nitty gritty of trying to figure out who's going to be the best cultural fit.
Yeah.
But this is just laying that foundation of making sure you're hitting all those basic marks, those critical foundational elements that get you to that next level.
Yeah. I think that's really important. And the other thing I was thinking about with the video or the face-to-face, right, versus a phone, is that they're going to be able to look at the professional attire, or the attire, I should say, of the person. Depends on the role, right, whether it's how one is dressed. And so is that consistent with the company's brand? Right? So important.
Yep.
Sure. Diction, pace, modulation, volume, everything that they look for. If you're client facing, if you are talking to their clients on the telephone, do you represent the brand that they are trying to emulate?
That's it. They need people that are going to really reflect their brand, right?
And if they maintain those records, it's a great tool for compliance, because it can indicate that you are across the board reaching out to all populations, and a good way to document that. So it's a real benefit for employers in that regard.
And that's a nice segue, Deborah. Thank you for that, because I was thinking about the diverse population that you serve through at Manpower, right? And so, I'm wondering, when you're thinking about interview preparation, how does the advice you give an individual vary between social economic groups, whether it's educational, differences in educational levels, and other kinds of variables? Profession versus trade?
We may differ here, but for me, it's all the same. I give everyone the same interview advice on any of those categories. What do you say?
I would say if it was driven by anything, it'd be the position. And that's just, making sure that they understand what their target is. But other than that, I agree. I think the behaviors are consistent, to be able to display a level of responsibility, showing up on time, dressed appropriately. All of those qualities really they're needed across the board to run a business successfully and be profitable. If you're in a production business like manufacturing, you need all the people on the line, or you're not going to get the work done in a timely manner. It applies across any industry. So I agree with that completely. And if I give customized advice myself, it's always driven by what the position is they're applying for. And it also tells me if a person's really looked at this is the title I want, I'm interested in this, and they haven't really read the job description, so it gives me a few clues to dig deeper if I'm helping them, because then they really understand. Because for positions with us, I'll go down the line. You understand that this job is a 3 to 11. You need to be here in the evening, and there is no day shift at this time. Or if there a chance to move on once you're permanent with the company, no, this is what you need to focus on now. These are the expectations, whether it's the schedule, the attire, if you're allowed any, to be tardies, what are those rules? Because every employer that we work with sets their own. And so we want to make sure that we give them a clear vision of the environment. And a lot of times people disqualify themselves along the way. So as a hiring manager, that's something that I look at, and my team really digs down into, so that we don't have as much position turnover and better satisfaction with our clients.
What are some of the things that they might do to disqualify themselves?
Just bizarre answers to questions, or coming in, just making a statement that indicates that they clearly don't understand the position. And so that's when, that's like a stop and, I need to dig deeper. And so, and people oftentimes, you get them comfortable and you're friendly, and they'll reveal that to you fairly readily.
Yeah, I think that's great, because having done this for 30-some years myself, I was just curious what your perspective was, because I know when I'm prepping people for an interview that they have poor eye contact, the lack of confidence, So I was just wondering, or the professional image, right? You can tell that they really haven't done their homework, as you were talking about. Is so much to the point that they really aren't appropriately dressed. They don't know how to dress properly. They haven't even thought about that, and how that may really get in the way or, be a ding against them because they don't have the image. But to the one point I think we're all three aligned on is the fact that we're going to change it up a little bit to make certain we're going to tailor our coaching to help them be better prepared in answering those specific questions as they relate to communicating their accomplishments for the profession or job, right? The specific role that they're going for. Well, that all said, I know I got to come back to this one statement that I made earlier. I know that you serve everyone. Yet, I have a sneaking suspicion, if you're like me anyway, you probably have a group that you're really passionate about serving. Is there one?
We do. About 2014 timeframe, we were hearing loud and clear that veterans were returning back to the U.S. and feeling the utmost in frustration. They were attending job fairs, submitting their resumes into those vicious applicant tracking systems and not hearing anything. And it was happening in droves. So we listened loud and clear, and we decided to create a vehicle where we could help them to get face-to-face interviews with employers that would not be job fair-ish, where they wouldn't be looking across a table, submitting a resume, and keeping their fingers crossed that it would get them to the next stage. So what we did was we worked with organizations and lots of Central Florida's largest employers, and we created this program that has now gotten legs, and we've replicated it in several different geographies around the area. In Orlando, we call it VBI, the Veterans Business Initiative. In Daytona, we call it VEI, Veterans Employment Initiative. But throughout time, we've had about 430 veterans and spouses come through the program.
Wow, in 3 years?
3 years.
That's a lot of people
and
to
I
serve.
love that it serves the family, not just the veteran, but the spouse as well.
Veterans and spouses.
So before you go too much further in telling us more about the program, why are veterans your favorite group? I was just curious, why reach?
All right, so
what
personally,
appeal?
my husband's a veteran, and I've got 2 sons that are veterans too. So it tugged a little on my heartstrings. But in essence, here's the real magic, is that we're looking for talent. We're always looking for great talent. Talent that can be reliable, that has got great skills, great work ethic, can come in and serve a leadership role. Where can you find those people?
Oh, I hear you.
Okay, so there's no greater arterial vein, that's not even an expression, but
it's okay.
Yeah, but there's no greater source that's pretty well untapped. And then here is this giant pool that can't find their way to employers, so it just made sense. So we just decided to help them along a little bit.
Well, and the thing that I think about, Lisa, is the fact that they have given so much, families, to your point, and the veterans.
Amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
They've given so much that
We owe
we've
them.
benefited from. We owe them. So I'm so
sure do.
thrilled to hear that that's your group. So keep telling us more about the initiative.
So what happens is twice a year, we bring them together for an 8-week session. So once a week, they come join us, and they meet Central Florida's largest employers, and we hook them up with kind of speed dating, if you will. They get to sit across the table from HR managers, HR practitioners, department managers from some of the largest and the most desired employers. And they get to do their best 15-minute on-the-spot interviews with those folks. And the sheer results have been amazing. We have had over a 40% success rate in getting those that have graduated with us, who have attended more than 75% of the sessions,
That's amazing.
hired.
That is great.
And in front of the sessions, we give them a 1-day boot camp, if you will, of all the tips and techniques that they need to kind of file off the rough burrs, if you will. What we found over time was that they have amazing skills and experience, but sometimes it takes about an hour to talk to them before you get to see all of that come out or hear it. So we help them to give all of that information. They are brainwashed to not talk about themselves. They're meant to talk about the unit.
Right.
So we help them to talk about themselves and to be able to crow about their accomplishments. We help them to show empathy and to show smiles and enjoyment and the culture of the company and happiness on their face, to not show that hard facade that they are trained for years to not really show.
So it's trying to help them to realize how to make that personal connection, right?
Fast. Really fast.
Right.
Because you only get, the first 5 minutes of the interview is, do you know how to do the job? Do you have the experience, skills, and techniques? The rest, whether it be a half hour or 40 minutes, is, do I like you and will you fit on my team?
Yes, that's critical.
And that's what we help them with.
Yeah,
That's great.
And I wish when I got out of the service way long ago, I wish there had been a program like that for me.
Certainly.
Because I kind of winded around a little bit and got a little bit lucky in figuring out where I was going to take my educational path. But it's to have that support and direction and a variety of choices to at least have those conversations. Maybe what gets revealed out of that experience is that, oh, this is what I could really be passionate about. I didn't even think of that as a career. Or that my skills from the military would transfer into something like that.
Right.
So getting that the skills transfer piece and digging down and really uncovering that is important. But yeah, as a veteran myself, I would have loved to have had something like that.
Well, I think the point that you've just made is, from my experience working with veterans, is probably the most critical. You know, they've got a wealth of experience, but they don't know how to convert it from the military to the civilian market.
Yep.
So I'm imagining that is a critical part.
It's the first step, is
Okay.
translating those skills and knowing where to go with them and what that all means in the civilian world.
Yeah. What are some other challenges that you see? You've brought up a couple really good ones. The transferring of the skills, making that personal connection, right, instead of being stoic and right? And thirdly, I think thinking of the team was the third one that you mentioned. Are there other challenges that you find that the military personnel as a group, and I'm not trying to stereotype just because everybody's unique and has a little different path, anything else that pops in your head that...
The resumes are always a challenge because militaries speak in acronyms.
Right.
And it's very hard for anybody in the civilian world to understand anything that happens.
That's right.
So translating that is truly difficult. And then also translating a military history that is so important and so established, and the accolades are amazing, to not take 8 pages of that and say that any of that is not worthy. But how to tell somebody how to take that down to 2 pages is a challenge.
Yeah.
But once that's accomplished, it's amazing what you can do with that resume.
What is your experience in terms of the accomplishments, the writing of the accomplishments? How well are they able to offer results, quantitative results?
Actually, that's interesting. Something I think I've noticed of late that TAP seems to be addressing better. That's that transition assistance program for the military as they're coming out. And then I think that there's a lot of people in service that, you know, like at Career Source and Manpower, different places where there's Veterans Goodwill working, that they really understand the jargon enough to kind of talk them off that ledge, the jargon ledge, and then also to really talk quantitatively. I know when I speak to groups of veterans, and I've taught several classes, I always talk about that, where you really are talking about results. It's very similar to the car that Lisa was sharing, and it's just putting it on paper. So really the end is, well, you were able to do these things, what was the benefit? And oftentimes I find, especially people coming out of middle leadership roles, they've helped the military save money or save time.
Right.
And those are the kind of results businesses really want to hear.
They contributed to the success of the mission in some cases,
Yes,
right?
exactly. I mean, that is definitely a benefit too, or just being able to work successfully as a team. And then while they do need to toot their own horn, I do find most of the time they are more humble, and that's a very appealing quality when you're trying to get a team to work together in a business, and you don't want to. You need a lot of chickens, not just a bunch of roosters.
Right,
You need to kind of get the group to kind of work together and row in the same direction. So a couple different.
And I want to go back to that car. Challenge, action, result.
Exactly.
And so when you're writing the accomplishment on the resume, are you starting with the action and then a phrase or so to help to understand the challenge?
And it can all be just in one bullet point. And it's
Right.
not just for veterans and for the military. That's the advice we give everyone,
Everyone.
when they update their resume, that it needs to be, that's the memorable part of the resume, and it's the memorable part of the interview.
Yeah.
And there's lots of hiring that's happening today, and it is an applicant market today. It's a different world we live in. What a difference 2 years makes,
Oh, my
right?
goodness,
I mean,
yes. Yeah.
especially in this market. Just be realistic from a salary perspective. We do a lot of salary analysis, so we have a really good idea of what's real out there. But be hopeful, be realistic, and be truthful.
Yeah.
And
Before you move away from that, a thought I had earlier, I'm so thankful that you mentioned the truthfulness, because I think there has to be alignment between the resume, the conversation in the interview, right? Really have to have alignment there between what one is saying and what they've written about themselves. Deborah, final word of wisdom in the last 30 seconds or so.
definitely be engaged in your own resume process. And that whole process of planning, you can't just let somebody else do it for you. Otherwise, it's not going to represent you well.
Ladies, it has been a pleasure to have you, and I'm so
thank you.
delighted that you have been here and shared your wealth of wisdom. And go veterans. Go veterans.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, on behalf of my guests and everyone here on the set of Your Career, thank you for watching, and remember, be career happy.
More information about this program is available online at millermediagroup.org.